Hello, it's great to be back in Berlin and see so many familiar faces and also so many new faces. I'm very happy that I'm here today because I grew with this community and I consider it part of family to be here, and it's always an honor to be here. Today we'll talk about a little bit what I did with a sample I wrote and migrated that to an instant app, and also taking a couple of steps beyond that for another thing that I'm currently working on. So this is why it's not just install to instant, but also beyond that. And it's not actually a retrospective. It's a kind of catchy title, but mainly what it is a story from what I learned. So firstly, there was a rebranding from Instant Apps or Android Instant Apps to Google Play Instant, which is a lot better for users because they don't really care about the Instant Apps, but it's part of Google Play. That's why the name that you will see in documentation is Google Play Instant. But underneath the hood, for developers, it's still going to be, the plugin's going to be Instant App, and it's still going to be Instant App. So it's not going away, it's just been renamed. One of the things that was with discovering apps is a bit tricky. So it's just the background on why we made it and what we made with that. It's like discovering apps has always been tricky, and finding the right app, and it involves a lot of searching, and then, well, you first have to find the app, and then you have to download the app, and then you have to use it. And as you can see, there's a funnel, so you lose users on the way, on that funnel, on the process between they actually found something they want to use, and they actually use it in the end and have it installed on their device. By now, device space is not a big issue for many, but still for some. So if the app is big and bloated, well, that's probably going to be, retention is going to be a little bit lower for the app than it would be for a smaller app. So that's one of the things that we're going to do with instant apps as well. Well, let's see what it does and how it actually can work. So basically, I searched for the New York Times crossword, and down here you can see on the search result that it says it has an instant app. And when I tap on that search result, what happens is the app opens immediately. I don't have to download it. It has to be downloaded, but I don't have to install it. I don't have to go through the Play Store and actively decide I want to download, install this app, but it can launch immediately. And you can go to today's crossword puzzle straight away from that link. From that search result. And it could be any link, actually. It's available to more than 1 billion of devices, and obviously we're expanding that more and more. And it's getting more devices as we speak. Let's take a look at a couple of the requirements for development. Firstly, you have to target Lollipop or above. Well, that's already quite a lot of devices, because the platform changes that are required were introduced with Lollipop. So before that, instant apps won't work. That doesn't mean that you have to go for min-SDK and Lollipop for all of your app, but basically for targeting, at least targeting it to be Lollipop for your instant app. Android Studio 3.0 has been out for a while. It came with all the new features that we needed. So it came with the SDK, it came with the Gradle plugins, the Instant App plugin, and the Feature plugin, which are being used for developing an Instant App. Also came with the App Links Assistant, which basically gives you an easy way to create a file that you can upload to your server, and the Play Store can then use that file to check whether the fingerprint that is in that file matches the fingerprint of your certificate, and then can download the app. So not anybody can claim any URL, but you have to have ownership of the URL, and this is the tool that you can use to easily create the file that you need to create this correlation. Also, the emulator supports it, so all the emulator with Google Play services support Android Instant Apps as well. And there's a refactoring tool, which we're still heavily developing, and for Kotlin we're working on that, and that's why I'm not going into too much depth of the refactoring tool, but I will go to the manual processes and the thought processes that you have to go through and what usually should go in which place. Also, one thing for Instant Apps is that the downloadable bundle size has to be less than 4 megabytes. That means your base module and any given feature module that is on top of that is considered a downloadable bundle. So you've got base module of 2 megabytes and another module on top of that, which has 1 megabyte. It would mean 3 megabytes, that's fine. If you've got one that's 5 megabytes and one that's 4, it doesn't work. Well, it would work, but the policy says that you have to go for less than 4 megabytes. This is only relevant for production, so while you're developing, that doesn't really matter. But once you want to go into production builds and want to have this shipped to your users, you have to go for a low file size. I'll show you a couple of tricks and tweaks that you can easily achieve that without going into too much trouble with just stripping out all the things that you actually want to have in your app. So there's no need to limit yourself on functionality, rather splitting it up into different pieces. So let's take a look at what I did. I migrated a real app. So Topeka is a sample that I've been working on for a while. It actually was my starter project when I joined Google and kind of is still a thing that I've been working on over time. What is it? It's a fun-to-play quiz that is available on GitHub. You can check it out. You can see the code that I'll show you today all on GitHub already. And the UI is basically 3 pieces. The first is a sign-in screen. Second is the categories that you can select. And the third is the actual quiz itself. That's what we're going to end up with in features as well. So firstly, it was a monolith. And we're going to split up the app into those 3 different feature modules. Like I said, I've been working on it for a while. So I started in 2014, then published it to GitHub in May 15. Then I added Transitions API, I lowered the min SDK level to 16 from 21, and then down to 14. So it's available on virtually all Android devices. Then in last year, shortly after I published a version of that in Kotlin. So it's now completely rewritten in Kotlin. So you can take a look at that as well. And now it's available as an instant app. But how did I do that? That's what we're going to focus on. Firstly, I went to the documentation. Well, I read up on it, and I saw what's going on, what are the limitations, what are the benefits, what do I have to do. A couple of the things I already talked about. And then I came up with a list. That list basically says, well, there's manual login in the app. Can't do that, so I have to take care of this. Also, the app is not URL addressable. I don't have any URLs associated with my activities and with my entry points. Well, that wasn't supported by the time. By now, there's an API that you can use to change that. But URL addressability generally is a good thing if you have the possibility to make your app addressable via URLs. It makes it a lot easier in the long run to work with modularized features. Also, the size was more than 4 megabytes, so that was not cool. Didn't work, at least for productions. Then I got cracking, I started working, and I just looked at what do I have to do, and started diving in. Firstly, I looked at the Smart Log API, which is the preferred way of logging your users in. I don't know if you've been using, for example, Netflix. If you signed in once on an Android device, it stores the credentials, and then later on you can retrieve them. Obviously, it's an opt-in process for a user, but after that, when I install Netflix on another device, I don't have to sign in again. I just open it, and it's like, oh, you've been signed in. That's quite a cool feature, and it reduces the friction for your users to actually go through the process of remembering the password and typing everything. Autofill has been a good benefit to that as well, but this is even less friction. So it automatically signs in users. Like I said, it's less friction, and it's a lot faster to access the content on that. What we want to do is we want to be able to save the credentials the first time. Then we want to later on be able to retrieve them. And also we have to hook into the activity result because that's an external service from the app point of view. And you have to get the result back whether everything was successful, and you have to work with the credentials. So that's what we're going to do within the app as well. Firstly, within Kotlin, I created extension functions for the API client to just give me the API client. On that, we have the 2 methods that are relevant. It's requesting and saving the credentials. And I also wrote a method function that allows me to intercept or apply stuff to the activity result. Basically, I pass in 2 methods, the success and the failure method. And the success method basically gives me back the user, and I can work with that. The failure method, well, does actual failure handling, as in there's no sign-in data ready, so you have to first store it, and that's a whole different flow. And with that, I don't have to do that within every activity, but all I have to do within the activity is implement the success method, pass it in, and the failure method, pass it in. And just override the activity result, passing that in. From the developer's point of view, the 2 methods that aside of that are actually relevant is requesting a login, where the method gets passed in transparently, works its way through, and also you can log out. So the API surface that I had to add for it is fairly small. And again, extension functions can be quite handy with that. And I'm quite happy that we can do that with Kotlin in this way. So first step done, cool. Let's move on to the next one. That would be URL addressability. Well, there is no website behind Topeka. There is a different quiz which does similar things, but well, I haven't gotten down to converging to them. So I just took a different URL. But basically, what we're going to do is, in this case, like I showed it before, behind that search result is a URL. And behind anything that is can be an instant app is a URL. And that URL just can come from basically anywhere. It can come from within the system. Well, there's one exception, which means your default browser that will usually not link out to an instant app. But if you type in a URL in your browser, it will stay there. And it will not try and navigate you out of there just for the sake of showing you the instant app instead. So what I did is I changed the intent filters. The first important thing is to set this to auto-verify true, so the Google Play Store can actually verify the URLs and the content in there. And then I add the data for the host and the path for that, and schemes have to be both, HTTP, HTTPS. There's multiple ways of declaring this. This is the one I found be the least redundant, so that's my preferred way of declaring these. And they do that for every entry point. You don't have to do that for every activity or every service, but for every part of your app that you want to be able to link directly into. Also, since in the future this will be modularized, we won't be able to access the class explicitly anymore, so that doesn't work. So intents have to be called a little bit differently. So we're passing the action view, we're adding a URL that we created before. Also, we set the category to default and browsable. And sometimes, because, well, we've got URLs and apps listen to URLs, you get a disambiguation dialog. And in order to avoid that, all we have to do is tell this intent that it is designated for the package that we're going to, that we want to have this in. If you, during the modularization process, mess around with packages, make sure that you actually pass in the package that it's designated to. So my quiz activity would be in a subpackage called quiz. It has to be in the subpackage called quiz. Quiz 2. So app is now URL addressable. Cool, straightforward with a couple of nice, easy features that have been there for a while. So that's nothing like too new, but next step is going to be a bit trickier. The size is more than 4 megabytes. So firstly, let me introduce the Gradle plugins that I'm going to use for modularizing. Firstly, I guess every Android developer in here. Who's an Android developer in here, by the way? OK, who's not? OK, that is, yeah. Just briefly, this is the Gradle plugin that you apply to your application. This is the Gradle plugin that we will apply to an instant app. The instant app module, the Gradle module, will not host any code because that will simply be ignored. So all the code has to be in different modules. And there is the feature plugin. A feature plugin is basically an iteration on the library plugin. So for an application, it will create an AAR, and that AAR will then be compiled into the application itself. For the instant app plugin, it will create an APK, which then will be packaged into the resulting file. So from that firstly existing app module, I just moved that all to base. I just renamed it. And on top of that, I created an installed module and an instant module. Base is using the feature plugin, and for basically using the feature plugin, and installed is the APK, so it uses the application plugin. Instant is the AR, is the instant app module, which then gets the AR. And obviously, you have to set those in settings Gradle, otherwise Gradle won't know that they're there, and you will have to add them anyway. So that's but with that, I didn't do anything for the size. So this is the prerequisite that I have to do to just get around playing around with instant app. The cool thing is at this point, if you don't want to ship it to users but work with it internally and even upload it to the Play Store to the development track, as long as your app is smaller than 20 megabytes, you can do that already. So you can play around with it. You can already give that to your team, to your product owners, and show them what you could do. And this is already your minimal viable product for working with an instant app and showcasing it. But this is not where we want to stop. So we want to go further. We want to see what we can do with feature modules and how we actually can go into the modularization bit. Like I said earlier, there is a couple of modules that we're going to cut out. We've got the base module already, and from that we're going to extract the categories module as well as a quiz module. So those can be downloaded later on separately. And all of those get bundled into the installed and instant modules later on. This was the point where I had to look into a lot of spaghetti code. The cool thing is, after you're done with that, there is a lot. Your architecture will be cleaner, and your code definitely will be cleaner because you can't have dependencies between those that are hard, and you won't have any cyclic dependencies. And definitely, after a modularizing app, it's going to be a cleaner code base to work with. On that note, if you don't want to go straight away into modularization, but general refactoring, it makes sense to have your package hierarchy more feature-wise than layer-wise, and within those features, you can go wild with whatever you want to have, but it makes it easier to extract those packages already into separate modules. So I've been shuffling stuff around. I basically took all the shared code, had that in base, so that means dependencies that I will expose with the API keyword. So many of you will be using the implementation keyword for Gradle. If you want to expose your dependencies to other modules, you just flip from implementation to API, so you don't have to bundle them in every single package, but just bundle them in the base. All the utilities are in there, so everything that's shared within utility classes and functions is in the base module, so other modules can access it as well. Also, the shared model classes, the whole data layer is in there. I've seen different approaches for different apps, which is fine as well. So if your app if it makes sense for your app to have different repositories and also different databases in different modules, well, fine. This is not the one size fits all approach. It's the approach that I took and I found worked really well for me and for those apps and for that app. Also, there's going to be shared resources in there, which means the application icon, which means strings that are being reused throughout the app, which means drawables and images that are being reused throughout the app. So just the stuff that's shared in there. So also colors and themes and styles. For some of your styles, you could just have a blank implementation in the base module, which basically just means give it a name, and the actual implementation is later on within the actual feature module. So you could do that to just keep it separate and clean on that level as well. Yeah, all the drawables that are shared in there, as well as strings and transitions that go from the base module to the feature modules. If there's a feature module to feature module transition, you can have that in the beginning or receiving feature module, but you always have to be very aware of where your stuff is being called from, because otherwise stuff won't work. Sometimes the system just doesn't display things, as in the framework is smart enough to not have your app crash, but if you have resources that have been moved around in package names as well, then you might just find that some things are not being displayed. And that has to do with those package names. One of the cool things about Kotlin, again, is that you can enable import aliasing, so you don't have to have the complete package name every time you use the import, but you just say, this is my rbase package name that I'm using, so it's the R file of the base. And I just used a drawable from this instead of from another one. So it happened to me, I've been bitten by that a couple of times, that resources were there, but well, in the different package. Also, while you're modularizing, Gradle caches are not your best of friends because they're caching the pre-built things, and they will, well, tell you stuff is there already. Well, it's true because it's in the cache, but actually it's been moved, so you might find yourself in a bit of a weird situation sometimes with that. So make sure to disable those Gradle caches for the time you're modularizing if you want to save yourself a little bit of headache. So let's take a look at the other feature modules. I've been talking about a couple of things already, but all the controllers are in there. So all my activities, all my fragments, all my other things that are basically part of my controllers. Also the custom views that I wrote, and the UI is in there. Also the tests live with, it makes sense to have the tests live within those feature modules as well, and not have them in the base module. But you can run each because, well, basically essentially everything, the feature plugin allows you to create APKs as well, so those can be installed on the Weiss and you have a small test suite. So you could parallelize your tests easier and have them run in this modularized fashion as well. Also, each feature module has its separate Android manifest with the activity declared in it to have that running as well. Drawables and assets that are within that module have to be in those modules as well. So we don't bloat the base module, but keep that as lean as possible, and have the big files only in those feature modules. Yeah, and there's the package name changes. You saw that I did one for base, I did one for categories, and I did one for quizzes. So I easily can see where stuff is coming from and how it actually works. But at this point, still, the file size isn't any smaller. It's just distributed. Like, we've got separate files, but those files are still too big. That is where the configuration APKs API comes in. Anybody has been dealing with multi-APKs? OK, then just forget multi-APKs for this reason and for another reason that I'm going to show you in a moment. So there's the configuration APKs API allows you to split the APK that's being created into by screen density, user language, or the processor architecture. Processor architecture, so your native code, can be quite substantial every now and then, but probably for most apps, the screen density, so the resources, the drawables, and all that are specific to screen density are there, but they're not being used. So, well, if we split that up, what happens is in your apps so far, you have all of those, but actually you just use one of them. With the configuration APKs API, what happens is there's different APKs for each screen density. And for a XXX HDPI, what happens is a base APK will be installed, which is devoid of resources, as well as this other APK with the XXX HDPI APK will be installed. So no need to fumble with multi-APKs. But on the other hand, you can easily just have this with a very straightforward set of Gradle rules in there. So instead of having those 3 APKs, there is loads and loads and loads of APKs that are being produced. All of them are being bundled in the Instant App zip file and can be uploaded to the Play Store as is, and the Play Store decides what to ship to the user. I've heard a question before, which is, oh, and what happens if the language changes, if the user changes language, and I've got the German one installed, and he changes to English, or they change to English. What happens is that the Play Store tries and download that APK as soon as possible, and as soon as it's ready and available, it will switch the resources over to your new language. That might require an application restart, but it depends on the operating system level as well as on the way you integrate all that. And how fast it is. And that was being done transparently and in the background. So with that, we went under the file size limit. So that's quite handy, and I'm very happy that we went there with like fairly little effort. It took a while, but comparing it to not being able to use instant apps on the one hand, and on the other hand, not being able to have a clean architecture, this is completely fair enough, and the tools help you a lot with that as well. So another thing is ProGuard. Who in here obfuscates their app or uses minification of ProGuard? Gradle. Wow. OK. One thing you have to keep in mind is with that, you have become a library developer. And you expose APIs from one module to the other. So make sure that your API services are there, because if they're not, if you obfuscate your classes and your methods that you're calling from a different module, the module doesn't know that it should work, and you will get crashes at runtime. So you will have to have all the things in base. You have to have all your API services in there. Have to be kept by Gradle rules, by ProGuard rules. One of the cool things is you can use the APK inspector and just go in there, and if you see a class that you want to keep, you can right-click on it and say generate ProGuard rules and generate keep rules, and you can select a couple of kept rules, and you can copy-paste that into your ProGuard configuration file, so that you don't have to think, oh, was it keep, which package, which is it 1 or 2 asterisks, how does this? It just generates that automatically for you. All you have to do is copy-paste it. There's a good article as well from my colleague Wojtek on enabling ProGuard in an Android Instant App. That was the first part of this presentation. So the takeaways so far are, firstly, make sure that you know what your prerequisites are. So it could be the URLs that you have to introduce. It could be smart lock. There's a couple of APIs that are restricted to make sure that an instant app, which is transparently downloaded and run on the user's device, doesn't do any shenanigans. Same with a couple of permissions that have been locked down. So for example, you can't access content providers that are not explicitly being exposed to an Android instant app. Also, your content providers that you expose, well, they won't be accessible by local apps either. Also refactor one feature at a time. Don't try and do everything at once. Just take the first feature that you think makes sense and put everything in a base module and then just take it step by step. Because if you go for everything at once, you will have an app that you can't ship anymore. And that is the thing where usually you should have, that's a creeping feeling on the back of your neck when somebody says, oh, we have to ship. And I'm like, yeah, we can ship in 2 weeks' time. And all the users will see bad things in the meantime, or no new features are being shipped. So that would be really bad. So take one feature, refactor that, and make sure that your app still works. Also, you have to apply those new plugins and adhere to the size constraint of the Android Instant app. The next steps would be linking it to an actual domain using app links, also uploading it to the Play Store, and maybe working with Android App Bundle and dynamic delivery, which is a cool new thing that we introduced at I/O this year. Who here already uploads an app bundle to the Play Store? OK. All right, I will show you why you should. We've been working on an app called Plaid. My colleague Nick Butcher has been the main contributor to it, and he started the whole thing, and we are currently rewriting it. There's a massive effort. So one of the parts is we're modularizing it, which I did just recently, so that's why it's not in the abstract and in the title, well, in the title of the presentation here, but not in the one on the program. So we underwent this whole massive refactoring. We're going to rewrite it. Basically, it's going to be complete massive overhaul of the app. What it does, it also showcases material design, transitions, animations in a real-world scenario. So it has external news sources that it pulls in data from. You can comment on stuff. There's logins. There's like multiple things that are make it a way more real-world scenario than Topeka, which is a local-only app. So there's also data that comes from the internet. And again, if you haven't seen it before, it's a beautiful app. Play around with it. And it's all open source on GitHub, so you can just get it from there. One of the first things we did is use Android App Bundle. Android App Bundle is the new packaging format for Android apps, which we introduced and announced at I/O 2018. So you can upload your app already in an app bundle. And we'll give you a couple of benefits. So I'll talk about the benefits later in this presentation. So again, getting started is you go to the documentation, and it's g.co Android App Bundle, and from there you go towards the next step. What does App Bundle do? It's fairly similar to the configuration APK's API, but with even less effort. So you've got one master APK, which is all your code that is shared between different densities and languages, or CPU architectures, or the densities as well. So, and that will be generated. And there's a multitude of APKs that you will end up with after creating an Android app bundle. And for a XXX HDPI device, for x86, it only installs these four modules, sorry, the master is there as well. And for just this change to upload an app, to build an app bundle, which is an action that you can do within Android Studio or even within Gradle directly, you can just say Gradle wrapper bundle, and you will get a bundle. We had an APK size of Plaid of 8.6 megabytes. And for the same phone, so for a XXX HDPI device, we went down to 4.2 megabytes. So that's less than 50% of the starting size. And all I have to do is generate an app bundle instead of an APK. So that's big. Well, not anymore, but. But we don't just utilize app bundles. There's a couple of Gradle plugins that we use. Well, there's new Gradle plugins as well. So there's the application plugin, there's a library plugin that we use for that, and there's a dynamic feature plugin, which basically is another feature for dynamic features we'll talk about in a minute. And with these 3 plugins that we used within the modularization, we created good ways to have an unbundled architecture of the application. So what do we do? There's obviously the core of the app, which was the base module within Topeka, so I kept the same name. It's the base of the app. And it uses the application plugin for the stuff that was in app before. It's the home activity and a few resources that are around that, which I already said earlier, so I'm not going into too much detail here. Also, there's a library plugin for a couple of things that are fairly close to the application, but could be unbundled in order to decrease build times. And if there's no changes in there, the Gradle doesn't have to rebuild everything every time. So everything in base is shared code and resources. It's a library plugin, so it can be reused throughout different feature modules later on. Also, there is the external dependencies that all reside in base. So again, the API keyword instead of the implementation keyword. And there's search. Firstly, I had search in a dynamic feature module, but since search is one of those things that it's transparently overlaid over the home activity, and there's a transition going on between that, we couldn't completely unbundle it. And because of that, we just put it into a library for now. We might completely unbundle it into a dynamic feature module, but currently that didn't work because, well, there's still a couple of hard dependencies, and we wanted to get the first bits of the modularization out of the door as quickly as possible. So library plugins always is a good choice if you can't fully unbundle everything and you want to have dependencies that are included into a bigger APK later on. Well, and there's the feature modules. Dynamic features is one of the cool things that we also introduced. It's currently in beta, so you can't really ship to your users with that yet. But you can play around with it locally, and what it does is allows you to do dynamic code loading. So there is an official way to just call an API and tell the API, give me the new feature. And it downloads it, installs it, and then you can run it straight away. That uses the dynamic feature plugin. All the separable activities are in there, and the resource is local to that. So in this case, it's 3 news sources, or 2 news sources, designer news, Dribble, and the about screen. Well, about screen, why? Well, mainly because we could. And you can still, in the end, decide you want to bundle this within the initial application in the first place. But we were working on gathering data, how many people actually click on it. So features that are not being used by all of your users, but by a subset of them, be it expert users or be it just a part of users that are maybe paying for parts of your service. You can put those in feature modules and download them later on. So not every user has to get them in the first place. And that's one of the reasons why we put all of those out there. And maybe if we add new sources in the future, we can easily, because we already have the API surfaces quite clear, we can easily have new modules that we add on top of that and at the side of that. So instead of designer news Dribble, we could add material up or whatever to that as well and fairly quickly integrate it within the app and keep it clean and encapsulated as well and download it if the user enable those news sources on the app. So how does it look in a more graphical way? We've got the app, which uses the application plugin. We've got the 3 libraries, which is shared search and bypass, which is a native library, which, well, because of app bundles, like I said earlier, is being split up into different CPU architectures. You don't have to have all the CPU architecture as O files into one single APK, but you only get the one that you actually need. And on the other hand, there's the 3 dynamic features. The way that they depend on one another is everything, the app depends on the 3 library plugins. And within the app, there's also a declaration of the dynamic features. And the dynamic features also declare that they're dependent on the application. Well, that's not a hard dependency as in a compile dependency, but it's more, you can use the resources once you've done that, and you can work with stuff that is in base, in the base modules or in the app module, and you can use those straight away from there. I said earlier that you don't have to have URLs for instant apps to work anymore. That's the same thing, that's the same logic behind that and the same mechanism behind it that we use for dynamic delivery. That's the Google Play Core API. That's an API that enables you to get modules later on in your install cycle, so not at the first place. You can request modules either and delete them, and you can do that immediately or deferred. So you can say, I want to download this now because the user clicked on something, and I actually have to show a blocking action to say, we're downloading this. Or, on the other hand, you can download features deferred. So you can say, well, I'm pretty sure this user wants to get this at some point, so I'm just downloading it. So for example, you've got a game, and with that game, you have the first 10 levels into the base module, it's already installed, and you can add stuff later on, and you can download that later on. Or even resources or assets that you don't want to download in the first place, you can just have them as dynamic features and download them later on within the process. How does it work? You've got the split install manager factory. You created it for an activity that you're running in. And then with an install method, what I did is I just checked if the module is already installed. If it's already installed, then I call unsuccessful load, which is my callback to just say, this is done already, we can continue. And if not, what I do is I create the builder, add the module, and build, and then call the manager to start my installation request. So it's a fairly straightforward API as well. And we can just go ahead from there. And within my unsuccessful load is what I do is I just call set class name for the package and class name. Again, this can't be, this could be with URLs, it could just be the URL. Without URLs, I can't explicitly use the class that we had in the first place because, well, the base module doesn't know that it's there. And we start the activity. Straightforward Android development as you're already used to, with a couple of benefits, which means dynamic code loading straight out of the box without. So like I said, to recap that, is you can upload the Android app bundle already today. You can just build it, ship it. And your users will get smaller APKs, which are optimized for a device. You can use the bundle tool locally, which is a tool that's available on GitHub, and to build and deploy your bundles to your local app, to your devices locally in order to test all those configurations that you could have. So you can do everything locally already. And you can introduce dynamic delivery, which allows you to, well, be even more fine-grained with that, and it allows your users to only have stuff on the device that they actually need and that they're actually using. And you can install or delete modules as needed. With that, that's the second step of takeaways, and I promise this will be the last slide on that. You can easily release the app bundle today. And if you don't want to, please talk to me later on, and I'm happy to hear what's going on and why it doesn't work for your use case. Also, faster delivery makes your users happier because it makes the app a lot more usable and faster usable. And map out your plan before you start modularizing. Don't just jump in and modularize everything, but make sure that you kind of have a plan of where you're going. You can add dynamic delivery at any point. You can use a dynamic feature module in the first place, and later on add dynamic delivery, so you don't have to do that all in one go. But you have modules already and can easily switch from either a library module or a dynamic feature module to also adding the Playcore API. And again, work with one feature at a time. Don't do everything at once. There's a couple of resources. The source code for both of the samples is available on GitHub. There's more samples for Android Instant Apps and for dynamic features. You can check them out. It's got all the code that I showed in there. There's the blog post, and there's documentations for Instant Apps and App Bundle. Thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for questions. If not, I'm here. OK, if you have a question, other than can I have a sticker, I've got stickers for questions. Ooh.
Can I get a sticker?
Yes, but not for this question and later on. Just find me later.
So can I shift to an Android bundle? I released the Android bundle, and
there you are.
So I released the Android bundle, but I want to release the non-Android bundle APK.
Yeah.
That is possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a one-way road, and you can upload both. And underneath the hood, what happens is it installs a multitude of APKs instead of one APK. But going back, I don't see why it would make sense, other than you're experiencing issues. And if you're experiencing issues, please let me know.
That's the only reason. If there is an issue and I want to revert and
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
So my question is about the single activity pattern.
Yeah.
How do you approach that, or are you going to approach that topic in the Plaid or in the Topeka?
There is not one activity within Plaid, and there's multiple of them. It makes sense. Sorry. Just first the questions, and I'm going to give more stickers later on. It's not one activity within Plaid at the moment, and we don't plan to make it just one activity. The navigation component and the single activity pattern that is recommended in there works for several apps. It doesn't work for all apps, and you should not refactor your application to have one single activity just for the sake of it. If it works for you, it works. But on the other hand, the navigation component gives you ways to easily link between activities as well. And I've got a sample currently under review, which is just addressing that. How can you do multiple features, multiple modules with different activities, and how can those be addressed?
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, I have one question regarding the dynamic feature Gradle plugin and how it correlates with the actual instant app feature plugin.
Yeah.
Do they support each other or not?
Yes.
Whether
if you take a look at the documentation, it already says that coming soon we're going to converge those, and it's going to be one thing that you can both. If you use dynamic delivery, you can already also have the instant app benefits. And one of the samples that is out there already.
Right now, if I have an instant app, for instance, can I just move to app bundles or not?
You can create an app bundle, yes. But dynamic delivery, you can't do that straight away. What you would have to do is you would have to take all the code that's in the feature modules and take that a level lower to a library and have a dynamic feature and a feature plugin. I know it's a bit more work right now, but like I said, it's going to be converging in the future. And
so we have some plans to you have some plans like make it easier.
Yes, it's going to converge, and that's the plan.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Right.
Hey, do you have any data on app sizes and download rate or uninstall rate? Like, I'm a developer and I want to convince my product manager that this is a thing we should do. Is there any data around that?
Well, there definitely is data. I don't know what we have shared publicly on that, but as you saw, like for our sample app, it decreased the file size for the largest configuration possible for by less. We now have less than 50% of the first of the file size that we started off with. So even just for that, it's absolutely worth it. And whoa. Yeah, so it definitely decreases the file size by a lot, and the data is, I'd rather not say that because I'm not 100% sure that this is right, but there is a strong correlation between file size and people not downloading the app or not going to keep it on their device. So smaller apps basically means that your users will keep the app longer on their device as well as download is going to be more likely.